Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar on direct sourcing. A warm welcome to you all. Thanks very much for taking the time to join us today. This is one of our long-running direct sourcing webinars. We first kicked these off in June of 2019 with our partners and colleagues in Beeline. So I don't think there's ever been a better time to discuss the features, advantages, benefits, risks, challenges of direct sourcing when one looks at the war for talent and what's being described as the labour market paradox. So we're going to be covering a number of things today, folks. The first is, what is direct sourcing? I appreciate that most people will know what it is, but we just thought it was a really good idea to define what direct sourcing is. So if we fail the so what test in any way, please forgive us, but we'll do our best to make this as informative and as educational as possible in the best possible way. We'll also look at some of the traditional benefits of direct sourcing, some of the challenges or pitfalls that arise in direct sourcing programs. Also, I'm really pleased, guys, we've got a great mix of speakers today who I'll introduce shortly, of course, but we've got some of our speakers from what I would call the solutions or sell side, if that's not too crude, and also I've got Jan-Willem Weijers representing the buy side. So he's going to give us some really important tips in terms of building a business case within your organization around direct sourcing. And then we're going to look at some of the best practices and around direct sourcing and how best to get your program launched, which is going to be really interesting. We're going to touch on the labour market paradox, which sounds really troubling, but we'll do our best to make that as straightforward and simple as possible. And then we're going to look to the future of direct sourcing. So once again, guys, thanks everyone for joining us today. It's going to be a hell of a webinar, a hell of a ride. I'd just like to introduce our speakers if I can. Before I do that, we'll just cover some brief housekeeping. If you could kindly mute your lines, we'd really appreciate that. My colleague Hannah Young will be running point. So if you have any questions whatsoever that are pertinent, of course, to direct sourcing or talent pooling, please put them in the chat. And of course, we're recording this session, so just to make everyone aware of that, and we're going to assume your consent for that, folks. So I'm going to introduce our first speaker, who is a good friend, colleague, and partner, Katie Bussey, who is the president of IMS Oneworld. Katie, a very warm welcome to you, and thanks so much for joining us as a speaker today. I'm really excited to have you on our webinar. You've recently been on one of our podcasts, which was a real blast, and I think anyone who listened to that would have learned a lot. So Katie, despite her tender years, has over 20 years experience in the staffing, workforce solutions, and human capital sector, where she was running MSP programs at size and scale for many years. Katie became the president of IMS Oneworld back in 2020, and she's really growing that organization's footprint across USA and globally. So, Katie, a very warm welcome to you, and thanks again. We're also joined today by Praneeth Patlola, who is the CEO and founder of WillHire. For those of you who don't know Praneeth or indeed WillHire is a leading direct sourcing and talent pool technology platform. As you can see in Praneeth's background and bio there, he's got an extensive experience in human capital and technology. Praneeth, a very warm welcome to you today. I've had the pleasure of getting to know you over the last 2 years, and I'm really looking forward to your insights today. So thanks for getting up so early to you and Katie. Last but not least, I'm also thrilled to be joined today by Jan-Willem Weijers, who is the Global Contingent Workforce Lead at Adevinta. Jan-Willem, I hope I've pronounced the Adevinta name correctly. I think I have. For those of you who don't know Adevinta, they recently acquired eBay's classified business. So I suppose they're kind of a big deal. I had the pleasure of getting to know Jan-Willem over the last 2 years, and we've had some really excellent insights from Jan-Willem, particularly on these webinars. So Jan-Willem, Praneeth, Katie, thank you all for your time today. We really appreciate it. And of course, thanks so much to our guests. So just getting straight into it, folks. So what the hell is direct sourcing? Some of you will already know, and I'm really pleased. I'm going to throw this question to Katie first because I think she can really articulate it best. So Katie, in your view and with your experience and expertise, what is direct sourcing?
The million-dollar question. So thanks everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here, Connor. Direct sourcing, if you look at it fundamentally, what is direct sourcing? It was really, it really came about because of talent acquisition and what talent acquisition does every day, which is, if you think about an enterprise organization, their talent acquisition departments are, all the recruiters or anyone from talent acquisition are going out and representing their brand on a daily basis to procure full-time employees. Part of doing that is collecting a pretty sizable collection of candidates that come with all of the recruiting efforts. So direct sourcing originally came about by the whole premise of, we have built this database full of gold and we don't have enough full-time, jobs to fill all of these candidates in that want to work for our company. We don't want to lose them. So what if we were to deploy a strategy to leverage this database of gold and fill them in contingent roles, and then using, contingent labor as a strategy within our organization to hopefully transition them to full-time, if the marriage, the win-win, makes sense. So direct sourcing is really about harnessing an enterprise's brand, going out to market, using the existing gold mine of candidates, and obviously attracting new, and then using all of those candidates and applying them and seeing if they're interested in placing them in contingent roles.
Gotcha, Katie. And Katie, thanks so much for that definition. And I'll just maybe ask Praneeth, not the same question, but Praneeth, do you think direct sourcing works best underpinned, and I think I know the answer to this, but underpinned by a technology layer or platform?
Yeah, I would obviously say yes to that. And first of all, thanks Connor and CXC for setting this up. Happy to be here, an honor to be here. Thanks everyone for being on the call. So technology, going through the journey of direct sourcing, I think it has been obvious journey for me personally, for our company, through multiple pivots. The technology plays a key role, but technology is not the only role. It starts from defining the process and knowing the process of what your organization needs. We call that as discovery, where you basically go through the process of understanding what has happened in the program in the last 12 months. Is there a business forecasting set up in place which enables you to bring that? And once you collect enough information, I just don't want to go much in detail to go to discovery, but once you have enough information about your program, put it in a piece of framework and understanding what particular model is better for you, that's when you're designing the model on top of a technology in enabling that. The key value of a technology in today's world is how fast can you generate a candidate? What is the candidate experience? Like, imagine in today's world, if you are buying a product in the market and as a consumer, and you have a bad experience, you would never go back to that particular place or buy the product again. So building that candidate experience is the most crucial part of the talent experience. And I think just to extend what Katie mentioned through this discovery of direct sourcing in our industry, right? Talent acquisition has been doing this for quite a bit of a long time, where you have HR and talent acquisition processes. Employer branding is something which has evolved, which is why every organization has a talent brand. But to deliver this employer value prop to the market, that's where the technology comes in. And with the enablement, and as internet grew, the recruitment marketing science has matured to an AI level, where you can actually understand and say, what is the best way to generate candidates, right? So technology plays that key role in terms of while you can actually build and design it, but to execute it the most efficient way, it's humanly impossible to do, like posting jobs in multiple site, managing and doing that analysis each and every time. That's, I mean, I would never do that. And I would assume that in today's world, when you can actually click a button and get your ride and get your food, nobody wants to do that. And then that's where technology comes as a key play, with several aspects of whether it's curation, talent engagement. How do you engage this talent from a centralized approach, whether it's going to be integrated approach, because HR technology systems, if you see the history of how what we went through, has always been in integrated systems. The biggest challenges even today in that ecosystem is, what is my integration project? If you're talking about 6 months project, the initiative itself might die off. So building or coming the technology which is enabling to create that plug and play mechanism, whether it's your HRIS system, whether it's your existing talent CRM, whether it's which is used on the full-time side, whether it's your VMS, or whether it's any other tools for this public talent pools, job boards, or several other matching engines or engagement engines as such. All that is why technology becomes a key piece. But without the right strategy, technology can do very minimal.
Yeah, I agree with you, Praneeth, and I'm really looking forward to talking about successful program adoption and launch, but also building the business case, because I think you've touched on a number of really important aspects of that our listeners will find so helpful. So I've got a question, and thanks, Praneeth, for that, for Jan-Willem. Jan-Willem, in your view, I know I think you've implemented 2 direct sourcing programs in your career to date from memory. In your view, do you need both a VMS and MSP in place for the program to be successful?
So first of all, Connor, thanks for having me, and thanks for the big audience I've seen. So it looks like quite important that people want to take their time to listen to us. So back to your question, Connor. So I agreed with together Katie and Praneeth, of course. Well, I've implemented direct sourcing from a continued workforce perspective twice. I've done direct sourcing and talent acquisition, which is also my background, even more. And I think from my perspective is that not having technology in place, not having a mature MSP or VMS setup, you can't start doing direct sourcing. So I think you first need to have all your basics right, which is a good end-to-end process, right technology, managers knows, and of course you can do that with suppliers, of course, that you're dependent on your suppliers, and you first can work on a proper process, and then you can make the next step to the next level and say, well, being attractive as an employer, but even as a company in a broader way, we maybe should build up a talent pool for our freelancers, for continued workers. That's the only way, in my opinion, when it can be successful. Just say, okay, let's do direct sourcing. That's a solution as one size fits everybody, which never will fit. So that's, in my opinion, the way you should approach when you're thinking about direct sourcing. And then, of course, you can talk about technology. You can talk about, okay, do we need to make a connection with ATSs, VMSs? On top of EVP, do we also want to build on a contractor value proposition? That kind of questions you could then later on. But first, you need to have a proper process before doing direct sourcing. Otherwise, and that's something you said, Praneeth. So if you have a bad experience, either as an employee or a freelancer, you never will come back. That's, in my opinion, that's my vision, or how you kind of call it, just a thought.
Yeah, and I agree with you, but and I'll address this to the three of you, this particular question. I suppose for me, direct sourcing and talent pooling are inextricably linked. I don't think you can have one without the other, right? And if you think about building a talent pool, which to your point, Jan-Willem, you need the processes and the data sources in place in order to do that, right? What is your capacity plan? What is your demand forecast? What was your previous hires? What sort of roles do you want to put into a direct sourcing program, right? Because, does it make sense for repeatable roles, or are you going to have your SAP R3 people in your direct sourcing program when you hire 2 per year, right? So there's all those important considerations that we're going to delve into, right? But isn't the biggest problem, and I'm really keen to hear your thoughts on this, guys, isn't really the biggest problem that we do not, in most enterprises, whether they're large, medium, and probably small, well, maybe small might crack this puzzle, they don't have a single view of all their talent sources, right? So, and what I mean by that is the ATS doesn't talk to the VMS. Generally speaking, I know there's integrations, of course there is, right? The Workday doesn't have contingent people in it, or your HRIS system. You don't know who the hell's left your organization and why they left your organization in most times, right? And there's not this single view on a general basis of where the talent is, who the past, present, and future talent is. So I suppose my question is, do you agree with the thesis? And I'll address that to either one of you. So whoever wants to take it.
Well, let's take this first. So because you're talking about enterprises and I'm representing enterprises, so what I have seen, it's not, yeah, no worries. It's not only about that technology isn't interfaced or talking to each other or whatever, but it's the upper layer that functions, honestly, are not talking to each other. So, and that's one of the things that you know that already. So you push the right button, is that, in my opinion, HR is owning employees. If you're lucky, they're also owning the talent development program. Procurement is owning, most of the time, the silo of continued workers. Or when your program is already a little bit more mature, it's owned by HR, working together with procurement, still a silo. And then you have outsourced service, which is basically also people working for your organizations, which is the responsibility of someone else in procurement. They're not talking to each other. When we're talking about capacity, when we're talking about talent, and you know already, is that I'm always saying your employee of today will be your freelancer of tomorrow. Your silver medalist from yesterday will be your finalist for tomorrow. So when you will start about thinking about direct sourcing, it's not only a sourcing channel for continued workforce or a sourcing channel from talent acquisition. So you need to connect, you need to interface those 3 silos, and they need to talk the same language.
You accept my premise, which is great, Jan-Willem. I feel incredibly enriched as a result of that, but thank you for that answer. Katie, Praneeth, any thoughts on that particular thesis? Do you accept it? Do you have a different view on the matter?
I do accept it, but also kind of broadly, I think, as Jan mentioned, the challenge is in organization functions more than technology is a problem. And not surprisingly, in technology, when the whole HR, the matured programs of HR technology, implemented ecosystems and enterprises talk about people analytics. I would say just go ahead and ask one single question, or even 2, is, hey, can you give me a total head count here for contingent in that people analytics tool, which is costing you probably a couple of $1 million every year to run a BI report? You will not find that. And because the data is not even fed into that tools. That was always HR focus when people analytics. And the second problem is, while almost every organization around the world today is talking about how do we build or align our diversity goals, our employee resource groups, and building that function from ground up and creating multiple practices in the hiring processes around the process. But when you think about that, same problem statement applied for the contingent, it's not applicable. In fact, your organization's diversity goals, and many organizations have 35% of the labor category as your contingent. Your 35% of labor categories missed out from that particular goal of diversity talent. So how do you even measure that? Like, you don't even have a data points to measure. Where do you today stand in your contingent programs when it comes to diverse talent pools? And the best part of our industry is, although we are a bit late, I think we have realized that as a whole industry, and enterprises, technology providers, and functions within the organizations, everywhere else, we are seeing a lot of momentum in bringing the diversity talent practices as a centralized approach. But it is still disconnect. How do you align HR and procurement organizations to speak the same diversity goal language? How do you align those goals together from a functional point of view, from a marketing or messaging, but also implementation, but also from a data? And I think we probably are less than 12 months away, at least from a systematic point of view, for that to be resolved. You have seen in the industry where Workday or Utmost, an extension contingent side of the Workday, the EMS, external EWS, external workforce management, the new terminology in 2021 or late 2020, that everybody realized that we need to have this connectivity between this, and the language is going across the board almost in every technology group in bringing that together. I think we are there solving that problem. Maybe 12 months, a few will solve, maybe 24 months, but in less than 5 years, I think we are looking at a completely different world with technology and functions together.
I agree with you, Praneeth. And thinking about the alignment between HR and procurement, it's almost been forced upon those two respective groups, because whether you're in HR procurement, you've got one single goal at the moment, which is finding the talent your organization needs. I haven't spoken to any talent acquisition leader, specialist, or whatever their function is in that, or a procurement buyer or contingent workforce leader that isn't facing that same problem. So this talent war, this talent scarcity, this labor market paradox that we'll touch on briefly, is really forcing that alignment between the organizations. And then if you look at some of the technologies that are out there, like your own, Praneeth, and there is others out there, by the way, and we won't name them, we don't have time, but that's really going to help solve that problem and promote that alignment. So just moving on, Praneeth mentioned curation and you mentioned efficiency. Katie, we hear a lot about curation. When I was growing up as a kid, curation meant, going to the library and indexing the books and all that, right? But these days in the world of direct sourcing and talent pooling, I believe it's got a very different meaning. So Katie, can you tell our audience what is curation and why is it so important for the success of a direct sourcing and talent pooling program?
Yeah, great question. So curation is kind of become the word synonymous with the services part of direct sourcing. And so, yes, the library, but really, if I think about where I first heard curation or where it was used most commonly before I ever entered this direct sourcing world, was when you speak about an art curator. If you think about an art curator, they are responsible for their art museum. They're in charge of building a collection of art so that they can curate it and whether it's with the times or to get people into the museum. So it really starts and ends with the curator, because if the curator is not onto something, no one's coming to the museum. So think about that in the course of direct sourcing. Curation is about talent and curation of candidates to ultimately put them on a silver platter and deliver them to the hiring manager. So how does that start? It starts with, we talked about direct sourcing. The whole premise of direct sourcing is brand leverage, building a repository of candidates that you can then fish from and place into roles. Well, curation is about taking that whole repository of candidates and creating the warm pond to fish from. So how does that happen? Engagement, interaction. And this is a huge, huge fundamental problem. So if we talk to talent acquisition prospects and customers every day. The biggest challenge in talent acquisition is, we talk about this gold mine, but they will be the first ones to tell you that, I hate to say it, but we do have a gold mine, but I would never be able to build a team big enough to engage and interact with this candidate database every day to place into roles. It would never happen. And the whole curation point and what we as a direct sourcing provider are trying to make is say, hey, talent acquisition, we will, on behalf of you, take that gold mine, we will put them and invite them. So it's not about stealing candidates and putting them in our technology. We will put them in a direct sourcing platform that you own. But it's all about invite. So there's a huge, we'll talk about common pitfalls. There's a huge misunderstanding from the enterprise level that we've found of, hang on, you're going to take my candidate database and put them in technology and they're going to become a member of our talent community. So please understand there is absolutely an opt-in process, because you want the person to say, yes, I want to be a part of this community, because that right there tells you that they're engaged in some way or loyal to your brand in some way, because they are opting in to be a member. And then once you get them there, you have to engage and interact with them so that you don't harm the brand on behalf of the enterprise. I mean, you are creating an experience for the candidate and you're promoting goodwill on behalf of that brand so that they will want to come to work and they will want to refer their network. Because at the end of the day, if you think about making a dynamic goldmine of talent work for the company, you've got to get them in a place where they feel like, I'm a member of something, I'm a part of something, I'm engaging and interact with real life human beings that actually are keeping in touch with me so that they're, understanding what I want to do and place me in roles. And so when they come to me and ask me for referrals, I'm more apt to do that because I feel pretty loyal to this brand because I'm a part of this community. So I think curation at the end of the day, it's not, curation is about, applying the art curation to candidate curation and keeping them warm and figuring out a way to engage with a pretty large subset of people so that the enterprise wins as far as placing them into roles, demand planning, and all the benefits you get from direct sourcing.
Well, I love those analogies, Katie, and it's really brought to life how important curation is and how one might go about it in a really productive way. So thanks for that. And Katie, I know we've all touched on the benefits of direct sourcing, and it's often crudely described, and by practitioners such as me, by the way, I put my hands up, as a cheaper, faster, and better alternative to traditional talent supply chain strategies, right? So my first question really to you all is, would you agree with that? Is that a fair comment? And if so, what are the benefits in detail as you see it, guys, of direct sourcing?
So I crudely referred to as, cheaper, faster. That's what you hear, the common attributes. What I would say though is, I have never seen two direct sourcing programs that have been the same. Every enterprise and their attributes require a different type of direct sourcing. And I think that Jan actually touched on that prior. You have to build and design a sourcing program that's going to actually do goodwill for the enterprise. So for example, if you're a company that has plants across the country and you need, just-in-time labor to come and work a line, that's going to be a very different strategy than, a large, Fortune 100 organization who's looking for all types of skills across the kind of white collar job categories. So I think that, I would argue that it's going to be cheap. I hate the word cheaper. I feel like it diminishes the value of the solution. It's going to save a ton of money, but it's not going to save a ton of money tomorrow. You have to build, if you build it, they will come. You've got to design the solution. You've got to pick the right technology partner that can really, get at the engagement and interaction, that you can really build brand ambassadors which becomes your candidates equal your brand ambassadors if done right. You've got to create a referral program. I mean, this is a critical piece. I believe that referrals are a huge, if not the #1 component of a direct sourcing solution if you are going to do it right, because it's not my opinion. Research shows that the top candidate, the top, oh my God, I'm totally blanking on the word. The top source for talent acquisition departments for your best quality hires are going to come from your referrals. That's not debatable. And if they're not your #1 source for hire, then that means you're not harnessing referrals properly within your organization. Because at the end of the day, if you leverage the psychology of referrals and you take your existing employees and you ask them for referrals, they're going to bring the hangs out with like mentality, where then you can start to really grow your organization. The same goes with the talent community. If you're building a community to directly source from, and you initially seed it with people from your existing goldmine of talent, and they are the ones that get invited over to opt in to be a member, and then you start to leverage them for referrals, now you're growing the attributes of your organization and what your organization hires. So you've got to set it up. You've got to establish referral programs. You've got to establish marketing budgets. You've got to get all of that framework solidified, and then you start to refer. But in the long run, it's not even going to be close to the money that you save as compared to trying to bleed your suppliers.
I like that. And I think we need to replace, you're quite right, Katie. I think the word cheaper, it does diminish the value, and perhaps cost effective is a better way of saying it, right? But yeah, it doesn't quite roll off the tongue in that sort of trickle on or whatever that the cheaper, faster, better. But Praneeth, Jan-Willem, in your experience as practitioners of direct sourcing, what do you think the benefits are, guys?
Well, yeah, I think Katie touched already some points. Is that, and I've said it before as well. If you just want to use it from a procurement perspective, just saying, okay, let's take out the middleman and to grab some markup fees, which is a saving. That's only one view. That's only one part you can have a look on. Of course, cost effective is always good. But from an HR perspective, and that's, in my opinion, even more important, is that you want to have access to your talent on the right time. And building up a program, and it's not only, and what I've seen in talent acquisition as well, that everybody say, well, we have direct sources and everything. It's not so easy to scrape from LinkedIn everybody you want to have in your talent pool, and you never send them a message. You never have been personal. Just send them the job posting and say, hey, I have a great opportunity because you're part of my talent pool. Can I unsubscribe, please? That's what happened. So you need to build a community. You need to be in what a two-way communication to your people, and then it's beneficial. Of course, then you have the right people on the right time with the right cost, or maybe the right price, or how you want to call it. And so making the connection between talent pools or sourcing channels from talent acquisition perspective, together with continued workforce, I think then you're a winner. Then you are really beneficial, because then you have access to probably the whole world. But it takes time to build it up. It takes time to maintain it. And you definitely need to work on, and as I call it, contract to value proposition needs to be in line with your EVP as well. When you're talking another language to your freelancer because they're only doing a job for 9 months, which is slightly different as all the warm feelings you have with your employees, then you're lost. So it could be beneficial from a finance perspective, but I'm not sure you're beneficial from a competences perspective, honestly. So in my opinion, that it's not only have to say, well, are you doing direct sourcing? Yes, we have that. And oh, that's fine. Check in the box. And okay, what's next? Okay, let's do a rate card optimization. Okay, well, then it's just a part of your strategy. Hopefully, it's part of your strategy, but you need to think about what's include, what's exclude, why are we doing it? Because, and then you can stop in how or so it's the easy model, you know. But if you don't know the why, don't do it.
Yeah, I agree, Jan-Willem. And we'll come on to the business case part very shortly. But Praneeth, anything before we move on to our next set of discussions?
Yeah, I think direct sourcing, many a times we use the word cheaper or cost savings or several elements. And the reason is because most of that is built from an industry point of view, from a sales view to sell products, right? And because the audience, if you look at the SIA report, right, the top 5 priorities when they run a report, it indicates like cost savings is the top one, right? And when you're looking at from a sales point of view or market from a sell point of view, you're aligning your messaging, you're aligning everything to focus on that cost saving element as your top priority. I think that's where that language came in, but we have seen programs as such where cost is not even considered as a key because those markups are so bad that we might actually have to go and ask, it is never going to work. You got to increase this because first your pay rates are so below the market because you did this analysis probably 10 years ago. You probably do it right now. You'll actually know what is better, right? And to Jan's point, I think it's like why you're doing it is like super more important than beyond that, right? For us, the why is also again the candidate experience. So to really make it simple and dummy it down from a benefits of direct sourcing, right? HR technology for talent acquisition, if you have remembered the days of paper ads and transitioned into more of email, web pages got built out, which would say contact our HR email, and then that transitions into a click through where you submit a form, which then gave the birth of applicant tracking systems. And the maturity of applicant tracking system has gone towards a much deeper customized workflows, segmentations by country, several others. Now we are living in a feature fight world of products in a talent acquisition space. And that gave, when the database is building out, as a natural tendency for any industry, engagement becomes a key. And that's where the talent CRMs came in. But when that all that's going on, the talent engagement maturity, the candidate experience awards, which HR and HR technology are so proud of in any organization, none of that has become applicable to the contingent side of the process, right? And I think there is only focusing on contingent specific direct sourcing, not talking about total talent. I think it's become very obvious that we have to bring in that candidate experience. If you're not bringing in candidate experience, like Jan mentioned, today's contractor is tomorrow's employee, today's employee is tomorrow's freelancer, today's freelancers, tomorrow's a talent is shifting between there's multiple shifts of labor category, and you have to ensure that you have to provide a better experience. Imagine the world we are living in, right? If you go to majority of the organizations, as a consumer, as a job seeker, when I go online, what do I do if I want to find a job? I go to Indeed, I go to LinkedIn, I go to Monster or several other sites and search for the job I'm looking for. What do you see most of the time? My client is looking for a role. What does that really mean even? Well, like my client is looking for a role as a consumer. And the black hole syndrome, which actually happens behind the scene, that is... that deteriorates and adds so much noise into the process, that's a problem. You're basically changing the industry to get to your backlog for 20 years. Direct sourcing is a way to actually upgrade yourself. It's not like a thing of should I do it or not. You must do it. If you don't do it, you'll be one of those guys who are still using Nokia 3315 in a smartphone world.
I love the Nokia 3315, but Praneeth, you've really hit on something there around candidate experience. And I know Katie's mentioned that. I know Jan-Willem has mentioned that. We're going to come on to the pitfalls. But to my mind, at the moment, we've heard of this great resignation, right? But I would call it the great rebalancing. And what I mean by that in its simplest terms is that the power is now with the talent, right? Because they hold the key, right? They can work with and whom they want these days. So the power is with them and they can call the shots. Therefore, if that analysis is to be accepted, we as practitioners, whether we're on the solution side or the buy side, it's incumbent upon us that that candidate experience is top notch, absolutely top notch. And if we come on to the challenges and the pitfalls piece, there's 6 that we commonly get asked about. God, I've just been writing on my hand, so forgive me. But there's 6 that we come across quite a lot, which is, does direct sourcing work for niche roles or positions? Is it better to be applied to volume-based or generalist categories? Is there certain markets geographically or clients where it's best suited to? How much change management does the organization have to put in to make this work, right? So what is their work effort? The biggest one that we get asked a lot about is, how do you manage supply base disruption or disintermediation when you bring out a direct sourcing program? Can they sit almost pari passu, first amongst equals? Can they sit side by side? Should it be tiered, right? And large enterprises are really concerned about that, because in the war for talent, they need the suppliers probably now more than ever, right? So that's the first 4. The other 2 relate to, how can you ensure that the candidate experience is really, really good? And I would go as far as saying it now needs to be excellent, to follow your point, Praneeth, and Jan-Willem and Katie's and mine. And then the other challenge or pitfall is around the employer brand or the employer name. Can you use it? I would suggest don't ever do a direct sourcing program if you can't use the client brand, right? Because who knows about CXC or IMS Oneworld or WillHire, right? Our brands, we've spent a lot of money and invested in them, but compared to Adevinta or eBay or Facebook or PayPal, right, it's quite insignificant, right? So oftentimes, one of the biggest challenges is getting that approval from legal to actually use the brand. Can you hook in your talent landing page or your talent pool into the career site? So there are some of the common pitfalls that I've seen and we've seen. So guys, anything you want to call out and how those challenges can be mitigated? So Katie, over to you.
So, I mean, you bring up a lot of good points, and so let me first of all, and Tilong Vang asked a really good question in the chat, Connor, so I think we should get to that after this question.
Yeah, you bet.
So there is absolutely a concern from the enterprise on, will this upset my supply chain? Because we've worked very hard to build our supplier partners. We have worked very hard to optimize and rationalize our supply chain. We feel that we've got a happy, tier 1, tier 2, we're organized, we are, so what is this going to do to my supply chain? So I think that you said, can it sit, where does this solution sit in the chain and the value chain of an MSP traditional solution? So that's where, having been in the MSP world for over 2 decades, I know the value of supplier relationships, and I know why enterprises have that concern. What I think is important to note is there are direct sourcing solutions out there that operate, would be debated as any other a supplier the same kind of way. I mean, direct sourcing it has many different iterations. My argument is, we as the direct sourcing provider who's harnessing your brand on your behalf, and we go out to market every day to create a warm pond for us to fish in on your behalf, we better be doing something different than the supply chain, because the whole point is, if you can take a direct sourcing solution, bolt it onto your existing mature MSP and make it better, then it's a win-win all around. And so what does the direct sourcing provider do that's better than what you can do with your MSP supply chain that you have today? Well, we've talked about it. If you set up your direct sourcing solution and you pick the right technology that has a lot of the, that really focuses on engagement, on interaction, on leveraging candidates to create more candidates. So, we have a technology partners, and we pick, you know, the right technology for the right client. But, you know, some of the technologies out there, you know, they really focus on, if you seed it with an initial seed population and you then use that population to grow, then you're going to get the attributes you're looking for. Then if you have the ability to have real-time inventory, if you have the ability to look into your community and be able to see exactly what skills you have available to you at that moment in time, to see exactly how many people in your community have checked in that week, that day, so that you can really gauge your community and the health of it, so that you can work alongside the MSP and say, all right, you've got a project coming up for SAP R3 resources. You've got your IT tier 1 suppliers that will work on it as per traditional methods. The direct sourcing component, in my opinion, should absolutely have a very targeted strategic component to that project to say, okay, let's look in our community today. How many people have those attributes? Let's leverage them for referrals. Let's leverage them to, you know, do they have crowdsourcing? I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff in the direct sourcing text right now that can really get at that. So, you know, Connor and I debate daily about, do we believe, you know, Connor comes from, now he's changing his mind. I'm showing him the light. That direct sourcing really can only be applied to repeatable skills, or you focus on one key area and that's what you're going to directly source, and you're going to be the best at directly sourcing that on behalf of the enterprise. My argument is, choose the right tech, seed the population with the right attributes that company's after, and start to harness and get referrals, and really start to, you're going to build your community, and you can then go after any skill that you're looking for. So I'll let Jan-Willem or Praneeth comment.
Katie, I've come around your way of thinking. You're very persuasive, and I'm interested. And thanks for that, Katie. I want to focus 2 specific questions, actually, if I may. Jan-Willem, the first question is to you, and Praneeth, I'll come on to you in a second, if I may. Jan-Willem, in your experience of this, right? How much change management is required to get direct sourcing off the ground in an enterprise?
Well, basically, I think a lot.
Okay, we'll move on to Praneeth.
I've never been so short in my answer. So, well, let me think about, maybe give some context about that. Is I think just that, coming back to my earlier point, is just implementing it, and then it's somewhere in the garage and nobody knows that it's in the garage. So why should you use it? Huh? So you have to do some change management and comes around. And then it comes to the why. So if you can't explain the why, you can't communicate. So why should you change? So I think, of course, then there needs to be change management. Huh? So basically, you have to learn and to guide your managers internally to say, hey guys, we have our supply base. Of course, you get your Christmas present from them. That's all fine, but still building up talent, you need to add this additional sourcing, and even when you can start working on asking for experiences with your freelancers and things, that just to ask them to, hey, you have worked for us, do you want to be part of the pool? Can you talk about the recommendation of your manager? Can you have, and you ask the manager to have recommendations of the freelancer. Then you're building up a straightforward, but it takes time together. So you have to guide your managers that you have this sourcing channel additionally to your suppliers. And that's the comparison I've done before already, is that when they introduced television, everybody said, well, newspapers are off, so a big issue and things, and they're still existing next to each other. So and that's also the change management from a supplier perspective. that you have the conversations with them, it's not a threat that we have that direct sourcing platform. It's additional on, and working together to attract the right people on the right time to your organization is working together.
Yeah.
So a supplier basically is not owning the freelancer. That was in former time, but then you owned people, and then you can say what they have to do. So in this world, that's not gonna about talking about diversity and inclusion. You can't say I'm owning you. So having a direct sourcing platform itself is on the same level of maturity of having your suppliers. They can live together.
Yes.
And leave and leave them alive, you know. So it's not a threat for. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yes. Well, thanks for that, Jan-Willem. Praneeth, I just a very quick question for you, if I may, and thanks for that, Jan-Willem and Katie. Question is this, Praneeth: would an organization be crazy to embark on a direct sourcing program without utilizing the brand? And have you ever seen a program that's went live without utilizing the client brand?
Yes, for both. And I'll put some more context to that. And
Yes.
Even after several educational sessions through almost from legal to procurement to HR of why it is important. For HR, it was easy, but they do not want to compete their traffic against the other traffic. That was the challenge. But for legal, it is still a difficult journey today, because nobody's putting down a hammer and saying we must do it. If I have an issue with co-employment here, I have an issue with co-employment which applies to you. So it's the same model. But very rarely that messaging has got through, and many of the times the biggest challenge is actually that brand approval through that process. And over a period of time it comes through, but many a times, going back to the previous question, why people or organizations are picking up non-branded experiences, right? And what would that look like? Yes, it is going to be bad, no doubt about that. Yes, it is not going to generate as much of talent engagement or traffic or engagement. Everything, the messaging go to market is kind of mixed up when you do that. And we have done that. We have championed that, working with sometimes an MSP brand, in enabling that MSP brand to actually do the same thing. But and the pathway forward on a roadmap is, how do you keep minimalistic change management? That was a bigger question, because it's so important walking through this newer path. Although direct sourcing is not a new path we're just adopting, that's been done for ages. But it is new to a specific set of organization. The language is new, because we call it as contingent labor, not talent acquisition for temp labor. That tells something about us as an industry, right? So when you're bringing this particular processes of newer processes, which are fairly not new, how do you decouple that and make it really simple? One is brand. You don't get a banker approval. Can I show you and let you build a business case of why you should do this? How much talent pool has grown? How fast? What is my time to fill? What is my cost of hire? What is the quality of hire? And how many of these people were able to convert full-time if they had to? How many of the engagement models have we built which enables us for better talent experiences? Once you build that proof model, then there is like, yes, this totally makes sense. These guys are payrolled by the payroll provider, so there's no co-employment. There's nothing written out there which says, using of an online job board, a brand posted with very specific disclaimers will get us away from the co-employment. But again, only because of keeping the change management minimal. How do you plug into a program like a supplier and go live? That's been the journey of how getting the programs off the ground very quickly. That would be but truly speaking, if you actually have an opportunity to actually even wait for 2 months to actually get an approval to do that, that is the best way to do it. Just to give you a more contextual metric example, we had one supplier in the program who was also kind of a partner. And we started the direct sourcing program to prove the point. In the initial, we said, we'll prove it to you in 2 weeks. How do we prove that? How much brand difference creates? We took the same job, released at the same time, same title, same job descriptions, put it on Indeed through direct sourcing program, put it the same up supplier, posted in the same, probably in the same 5 minutes. The customer brand generated about 129 applications in a single day. The supplier job generated 21 applications.
Oh my God.
Same budget, same.
There's our answer, right? It just underlines the importance of this. And guys, I think anyone listening will have enough ammunition to build a business case, right? Around direct sourcing. I think we've hit some really good points. I want to move on for the last 5 minutes to the questions we've got from our audience. And thanks for joining, and thanks again for the questions. So our first question, Katie, I'm going to hand over to you, if I may. It's from Tilong Vang. And I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Do you find the candidates in the curation pool, if they find a position with another company, leave the pool, or do they tend to stay in the curation pool? This person's trying to gauge how many of these candidates are still available, if they're in maybe 4 or 5 other curation pools with other companies. So Katie, over to you, if I may.
That's a great question, because not all direct sourcing solutions, which when I say a solution, that means the curation and the technology, are created equal. And so the clarifying question I would say back to you, Tilong, is what kind of direct sourcing curation pool have you created? Because Jan-Willem said this, and I could not agree with him more. The power of a community is, well, you can't call it a community unless everyone in the community can engage and interact in a 360 way. So if in my opinion, that is the absolute way that you create your direct sourcing program, is you've got a technology that allows for that communication. It allows for the candidate within the community to own their profile for the life of their membership in that community. Why is that important? Because Tilong, to your point, you need to be able to engage the engagement of your community. You need to then understand if they've taken work elsewhere. However, a properly built community, in my opinion, involves candidates that will never work for you. In fact, they're in there as a side hustle to refer their network, because they fit the profile of someone who, yes, they were originally found because the enterprise, picked a select group of candidates, sent them an invite for their new talent community, and they opted in. They're engaged, they get the marketing, they feel a part of something, but they're currently working. However, they might be an SAP R3 resource. We're not going to discriminate if you never want to work for us. However, when you see an SAP R3 job come out and there's a $1,000 referral bonus, chances are he's going to be pretty motivated to give us or her the referral. So it really matters and starts in what's the makeup of your pool, because you want candidates to stay in as long as they're engaged, they're willing to refer, and so you keep them around. But you need to have the ability to take a proper inventory of your community, and you need to be able to allow for who are in my community that are truly just referral mechanisms and who are really wanting a job. Those two things make a difference, and then you can start to take inventory. So it's a great question. Every direct sourcing solution with technology operates a little bit different. And so the answer to your question could be answered in 5 different ways because of that.
Thanks, Katie. I think that was a really comprehensive answer. And Praneeth has been busy typing away, responding to Richie Smith. Hey, Richie, how are you doing? Thanks so much for the question. So, guys, just very briefly, if you can hang on for 2 minutes, I really like this question from Stephen Well-Be-Love, which relates to enterprise open talent platforms, or talent marketplaces, as I would describe them. And essentially what Stephen is asking is, are talent marketplaces or open talent platforms, which are curating crowds or communities, is this a form of direct sourcing, albeit in a different way? I can answer that question. I think it is not direct sourcing, unless they're There's a whole lot of pre-built components into that. But listen, I'll hand over to Praneeth and Jan-Willem and Katie to close out with that question.
Well, from an enterprise perspective, maybe the marketplace itself is not a direct sourcing.
Correct.
But direct sourcing program could include a marketplace.
Yes.
So it's part of it. So what I've done before, so we built our own community and we connect some marketplaces into it, just to make sure that when you have a job posting or things like that, you can just push it to the world, and also using that kind of platforms. But building your direct sourcing platform, it is just the platform. So you connect, you can connect all those platforms into it, onto it. But building the community, that's more than that.
Yeah, I agree. Praneeth, any questions or any response in relation to that question?
So I think the question is fairly broad in nature as such. I think for the most part, there is a concept of public talent pools and private talent pools or marketplaces, which is very matured in our industry. Whether you're tapping into a freelancer marketplace or whether you wanted to create a crowdsource recruitment using recruitment marketplace, which is you're competing several recruiters to win against one submission, or whether you're trying to build out a collection of resources in a very geo-local strategy with a skill specific strategy. But now you think that for your program specific, you are basically engaging and building that talent because it's relevant for you. You're investing into that because this is a repeated part of it and you want to do it in volume. So you're switching that on channel through an automated or non-automated approach. So all this is data. Data can exist in multiple marketplace forms, or multiple database forms, or multiple elements, whether it's LinkedIn database, Indian database, Monster, Career Builder, C, the list goes on. What is relevant for you? What strategy is relevant for you in reaching out and bringing that back and engaging, and also making sure that you're keeping it sane, right? I think it can be part of it, but it can be, it has to be co-designed based on the program specific needs, based on it. Sometimes if you have a global program or even a national program, which has 5 different job categories, you cannot say, I'm going to use LinkedIn for light industrial. That doesn't work, right? If your 50% of the program is light industrial, the process of engaging the talent is completely different. How do you Uberize that experience? That's a very key powerful element, is how do you Uberize, like what Uber has done in the past 10 years or 7 years? How do you take subsegment of that learning and apply to your geo-local talent specific from pre-pooling of that on-demand talent? So each particular segment is different and the marketplace or data sources is completely different. It's just a strategy and how you execute it.
Good stuff. Well, Praneeth and Jan-Willem and Katie, guys, thanks so much for your insights, your expertise, and giving us a showcase into your experience. I think for our listeners, they would have learned a hell of a lot around the features of direct sourcing, the challenges, the opportunities, the risks, and more importantly, the benefits. So I really appreciate your time, folks. Thanks ever so much. And also thank you very much to our audience today. Really appreciate you guys joining and hope you can tune in for our next one. So thank you very much, guys, and I'll close it down. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Have a good day. Thank you, folks. Bye-bye.